everybody. This is Best in Show Books. I'm Jeanna.
And I'm Shelby.
And we are at Naughty Dog Books, an independent bookstore in Nashville, Indiana. And today we are super excited. We get to interview Michael Koryta, a local author who also writes under the pen name Scott Carson. Scott Carson is the pen name for his supernatural books, and Michael Koryta are more his thriller crime novels. And we are huge fans, Shelby especially, and she introduced me to this, and I'm so glad. I have enjoyed these books. I just finished Lost Man's Lane, which is his newest under the Scott Carson name, and he's got a new one coming out in August.
In just a few weeks, or now, depending on when this comes to air, Departure 37 is going to be his newest. It's kind of a Twilight Zone-ish vibe, Cold War era meets AI, and we discussed this quite a bit in the interview. So you're probably familiar with the Michael Koryta Scott Carson name. If you have watched our channel before, you definitely are, because you have heard me talk about how much I love his books. And he is a New York Times bestselling author. He wrote his first book when he was 19, and we get into all of the really interesting bits of his life and his writing career in the video. And we just had such a great time interviewing him, and very kind and very personable.
Yes.
And we just hope you enjoy watching the interview as much as we enjoyed filming it and speaking with Michael. So
here is our interview.
Without further ado, Michael Koryta.
We so appreciate the fact that you were willing to do this interview with us this morning.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's a privilege. Thank you.
And I just finished Lost Man's Lane yesterday. So that was my latest book of yours.
I hope it held up. That one's kind of near and dear to my heart. So,
well, I think you can tell when you read it that it is near and dear to your heart, but we'll get into that in a minute. So just to tell our viewers a little bit, you are Michael Koryta. You also write under the pen name Scott Carson. You are a New York Times bestselling author, and you have written loads of books starting at when you were 20. Is that right? Your first book came out when you were 20?
It came out when I was 20. I wrote it when I was 19, yes.
Wow. Awesome. Important distinction there. So you're Michael.
I don't want to lose that year. I'm at a point in my life now when I'm trying to grab everything from the past. And
yeah, absolutely.
I understand that.
So your Michael Koryta books lean more mystery thriller, and your Scott Carson books lean more supernatural, right?
Yes. Yep. I had written a few books under the Koryta name, like So Cold the River and The Ridge, that ventured off into the supernatural territory. And then I came back to, I guess, what you would call crime fiction or thriller. And I realized it was a challenge for the publisher's marketing team. It was a challenge for the bookseller, and it just sort of confused the readers. So I thought, okay, let's come up with a clear sort of brand. I hate that word, but it's the only one that really applies. And it also allowed me to fulfill this life dream of having a last name that people could spell and pronounce.
Right, yeah.
Carson goes down a little bit easier than Koryta.
Yeah, definitely.
I feel you on that one. I always say I'm a hooked on phonics lesson when I spell my name, because it's Jeanna, and people are just like, really?
Yeah. Jeanna.
Jeanna, I get it all. So I appreciate wanting a name that you can spell and pronounce.
Yes, you know my struggle.
Yes.
So one of the most exciting things probably going on in your life right now, you have Departure 37 coming out in a few weeks, which we're actually going to piggyback that towards the end of our talk, because we wanted to move through some of your other books that we have also read and loved, but we are so excited to get into that one and to congratulate you for that release, because I have read that. It's very good. I loved it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. So first question, I guess we're going to do a softball. What are you reading right now? If anything.
So that should be the safest softball. And I don't know if I'm allowed to share what I'm reading right now.
Okay.
Which is a great tease, I know, but I over the years forming friendships with different writers, one of the truly most special things in my career has been the opportunity to read things really early. And in some cases, I've been able to read drafts in progress, and I don't think I have great feedback, but offer some feedback. And it's always such a special thrill when you make the acknowledgments in someone's book for making that inner reader circle. So I'm reading something really good right now that I don't think I can talk about because it doesn't have a title. And the book that I would promote, everyone should pre-order from you guys, is called King Sorrow by Joe Hill. It comes
Oh,
out in October. That'll be big. And Lori Roy has a new book out too, which I bet you already have in stock. And she's really good. She just doesn't miss.
yeah.
Okay, well, thank you.
That's, it was an answer, but a not answer, and very deliciously mysterious.
Try to
Having,
build that suspense.
yeah, yeah.
And the only way you can get to the bottom of this is by going into an independent bookstore. So
Yes, yeah.
So you said that you've had this privilege before. So how did you, or when you meet other authors, are you a fan?
I think it's as simple as I'm a huge fanboy,
Okay.
and I always I'm much more interested in um, reading. Like I would rather get the early look on someone's book. I mean, to this day, it's so exciting to feel like you were one of those um, first readers. And I think because I was so young, a lot of people went out of their way to be generous to me.
Oh,
So, some writers who I admired, I thought of as icons along the way. I've gotten to know. I'm thinking of like Michael Connolly here, Dennis Lehane, Stephen King, Dean Koontz, Stuart Onan became a really sort of great friend along the way. And when I think back to, okay, well, why did that happen? It probably has something to do with the fact that I was just kind of a hopeless fanboy, and I was publishing, but I was not particularly savvy about anything marketing or
Mhm.
promotional, and maybe that helped me to an extent.
I think on the fanboy fangirl, this is like slightly shameless, but I told my husband, he was like, you have to tell him. So when The Chill came out, your first book under the Scott Carson pen name, we didn't have the store here. I was just like some lone person with a Bookstagram account, and I got an arc of The Chill and I read it, and I was like so impressed. Also, being a reader of like vintage Stephen King, Dean Koontz, I read The Chill. I loved it. And I reached out to Emily Bessler. Is that her name?
Yes, yeah, my editor and
Yeah.
publisher.
Yes. I reached out to her because like her contact info was in the arc. And I like wrote this little like note, and I was like, I just wanted to say this book was so impressive. It had such a strong sense of place. And I just like gushed over it. And she said, do you mind if I pass this along to the author? And so, which you probably hear that all the
That
time.
is
But I was like,
No, you have no idea actually
so
how
good.
wonderful that is, because I don't think many people, they might try to reach out to the author. Um, Particularly, like I'm not overly connected on social media. A lot of people are. Um, but the editor tends to be sort of a forgotten, link. And the editor is the one who acquired the book, who,
Yeah.
helped shape it into what it is, and then makes sure that it finds its way into the world. So there's nothing that I think would please the writer more than knowing that you let the big boss hear that the book was good.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for making the time to do that.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it was fangirling. So, speaking of like a sense of place that I feel like all of your books have very strong, um, emotional centers. Like I said, you connect with these characters so much. I feel like
yeah.
being in a bookstore and being an author, you probably read a ton of books, and I know our viewers do, where we finish it, we shut it, and we move on to the next book. But I feel like your books are not like that. These people stick with you for a long time. Like, I'm going to go to a character from Lost Man's Lane, which was your most recent release under Scott Carson, to Sean Weller, which was probably no surprise.
It's my favorite one too. That's the one I put down.
Yeah. How did he come about, and how do you craft such real, I guess real characters? Yeah, there's no other way to describe it.
Weller, I'm so glad you bring him up. and I call him the Weller, even though
Yeah.
his name is Sean Weller, but he refers to himself as the Weller throughout. He's one of my favorite characters, I guess in general, but certainly one of my favorite ones to talk about because I had no plan for him at all.
Hmm.
It was a placeholder name, and I thought I knew I wanted this to be a coming of age story, kind of in the tradition of a Stand By Me or Boy's Life. A Prayer for Owen Meany is a book that I love. So I had that target in mind, but I thought it was going to be about the friendship between Marshall and Dom.
Mhm.
And then they arrived at that party, and Weller makes his appearance. And this is a guy, I think, at first, he's just a name. And then I get into the scene, and there's a little bit of conflict with him and Marshall. And something just, all my lights went off there. There was so much more energy between Weller and Marshall than I felt there had been with Dom and Marshall. And when I thought about that, at first it seemed like a problem. But then I realized one of the things that happens in high school, and I guess it continues throughout life, but it feels particularly vivid to me in those kind of teenage years. You can walk into a social event with one friend has been your best friend, and then you leave with another. And it's not because of any kind of great falling out. It's just, the way things go. And I thought, okay, this is actually very organic that, the start of a new friendship is forming here. And then the reader is along for the whole arc of that friendship. And that felt more special to me than bringing them in kind of already behind the relationship
Right.
because we already have that with Carrie and other characters. So also just the way Weller talked. Um,
Oh my gosh.
he,
Yeah.
he,
Hilarious.
he seemed to have his own voice, and
Yes.
when a character surprises you as a writer, that's when this is the most fun job in the world. I mean, it's just, and I had no idea what he was going to say or do or who he really was. So yeah, he was a perfect example of a moment when I feel like I'm on equal footing with the reader.
Yeah.
I didn't know this guy was going to show up, and I just like him, so I'm going along with him.
Hmm.
I think he was a surprise character for me. I'm close-ish to your age. So the 90s in Bloomington was special. I live in Trafalgar. And so
Oh, sure.
going to IU, going to the school, going to the games and all of that, that was really neat. I loved the Weller. He spoke to the football guys that I knew from high school. He spoke to that. They had heart. Sometimes they always weren't the smartest academically, but yet they went to the military. That was a path that a lot of my guy friends from that era took. And so I loved him. I loved the humor. I thought that was great in the sense of this story was deep. It was so deep. The characters were so deep. And then you got the Weller with this humor. I loved that.
I'm so glad. It's interesting you mentioned how you felt as if you knew him or you could connect with him too, people from your life. That seems to be more true than I would have guessed. So, one of my first readers was always Bob Hamill, who was my writing mentor. We just lost him a few days ago, very sad. But he was born in 1937. And when I gave him this book, I remember thinking, I don't know how Weller is going to go over for Bob. And he loved him. And he said, it's like, we all know someone like that from high school. And I thought, wow, I mean, I'm talking to someone who went to high school, before the Korean War was done. I think he graduated. And yet he was like, I know that guy. So the sort of universal quality of their friendship, I guess, worked in a way that I hoped it would, but you're never sure.
Mhm. So, Lost Man's Lane, like you said, is a coming of age story set in Bloomington, which is just like 20 minutes from where we are. So, how do you research? How do you go about like researching and getting the inspiration for a book? Because I know Bloomington is very close to your heart, having grown up there. So do you, let me think how to say this. Do you write what you know? Does that make sense? Or do you sometimes?
Usually not, actually. I think it's you get that advice. And I'm not saying it's bad advice, but a lot of times what we know just doesn't spark us creatively. We want to write because we don't know something. Or you want to take a journey in someone else's experience. And I love research. I was a journalist, I was a private investigator. So I have a tendency, I think, to drown in research. I love to go down into the weeds. The Chill is a perfect example. I mean, I spent
Oh.
way too much time finding out the engineering of dams and spillways. And there are many readers who would argue I spent way too much time writing about it as well. This book, Lost Man's Lane, was a little bit unusual because it was what I knew. I had worked for a private investigator in Bloomington as an intern in the 90s. I guess these guys are a year older than me. I graduated in 2001. They graduated in 2000 because I wanted to sort of spin the story around Y2K and then get to 9/11. I thought the bookends for coming of age in that moment, it was Columbine and 9/11 and the sort of collective sense we had in this generational moment of um, you realize that the adults in the room may not have answers.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they're going to promise you that these things will never happen again, but at the end of the day, they're human too. And I think that was a sort of a wake up call moment for a generation that had grown up in otherwise unprecedented wealth and safety and security. And then you watched a Columbine and thought, you listen to everyone from both parties, federal, state, community tell you this will never happen again. And I don't think anyone could have possibly believed that was the starting point of this thing that 25 years later, 26 years later, not only has it continued to happen, but we're no closer to addressing that problem of school shootings. And something like 9/11 was completely implausible. I think to a teenager in middle America in that moment. So I knew those would be the bookends. And in between, I was filling it in with a lot of stuff that I did know and I had lived. And I think I held off on writing that story for a long time because I didn't want it to seem too close to my own life or real people. I'm still getting that. It's amazing. You can try so hard to push away any overlap. And then inevitably, people will come up to me and say, like, oh, I know who Carrie is, or I know who Weller is. And like, no, I assure you, you don't. But
What
um,
about, to that point, what about the girl, the employee from the Chocolate Goose?
Oh, yeah.
yeah,
What was the inspiration for that? Because being a local, I certainly saw, Jill Bierman, Lauren Spear, this like very sad rash of girls who we have seen go missing from Indiana University.
yeah, Hannah more recently. I mean, it's been something that does sort of loom over the town in my lifetime. There have been these signature landmark tragedies, and they tend to involve, the disappearance of um, young girls who are either attending IU or very near the campus when it happened. So I thought to write honestly about Bloomington, I needed to include some element of that. I had already written a book that felt very close to um, my experience with the Jill Bierman story and how it happened, which was,
Mhm.
I covered that story as a newspaper reporter, but more, um, that one it feels more personal to me, which I realize is an unsettling thing to say about someone else's tragedy, but they found her bike when she went missing. They found it on the road where I grew up. And
Oh.
she was my sister's age. I went out with a friend in these fields that I had known literally my entire life as part of a search party. And then I was a police beat reporter working on the case after it, had still been unsolved, and we had the false confession that everyone chased. So that story really was a central point in my life, and it always just felt it was the first time I think that I had the sense of how easily tragedy and crime could find your house, you know,
Mm.
because really because of the route she took on that last bike ride and how close it really did come. And I struggled to write with how to deal with that because I don't want to have anyone feel that I'm, co-opting Jill's story or Lauren's story. And yet it tragically does become the community story as well, in the way that Ben Smith and those shootings on the 4th of July, 1999, became part of our story.
Mhm. Yeah.
So how does setting play into your stories? Does it dictate or inspire the story, or do you have a story and then find the setting?
It's a really good question. I almost always begin with setting.
Okay.
The only thing I have is a character and an inciting incident, I guess. But setting to me is really the jumping off point. So when I think of a book like Those Who Wish Me Dead, I had been on a backpacking trip in the Beartooth Mountains, and I just remember thinking, this place is so stunning, and you could get characters into a lot of trouble up here.
Mhm.
Um, and that was it. That was really all I had. The story came from a desire to write about that place. A book like So Cold the River, I had watched the West Baden Springs Hotel through that incredible restoration, and I had seen it as a ruin and then seen it once they opened it. And I felt like, okay, I don't know the story, but I know that I want to write one here. So I almost always begin with place.
I really enjoyed So Cold the River being somewhat localish. The history, and again, I went to a conference when I was in my early 20s in French Lick before it was a casino, and then the fire and seeing all of that, and then going back now as an adult, taking my kids to the water park that's down there, like how that's all changed. And so I loved the history. I loved the setting of So Cold the River. That was super enjoyable.
Thank you. It's such an incredible, I've never been anywhere else in the country, I mean, really in the world, where the past seems to surround you in quite the same way that it does in that hotel, in particular. But that said, it's different if you saw it before the restoration.
Mhm.
I mean, if you saw it when it was a full ruin, then and only then do you appreciate just how bizarre it is. One, that it ever existed in that part of the world, but two, that anyone said, okay, we'll bring it back to life here. And what Bill and Gail Cook did, is just, I mean, it's incredible. That renovation it's an engineering achievement.
Yes.
That it is.
So let's talk a little bit about Departure 37. I don't know how much you are allowed to talk about it because it's not out yet. And we certainly don't
By
want
all
to.
means, the more questions, the better. So.
Okay. So what was, if you can loosely tell us, what was the inspiration for this? Because I felt like it was very different from the other books under the Scott Carson pen name. And at times I felt like it leaned a little science fiction, loosely.
Yeah, hopefully I obviously have a struggle with genre or determining, which one I want to write in. And the problem is I want to write in all of them. So if I'm lucky enough to keep writing until I'm, 60 or 70, I'll probably have five pen names, I guess.
Yeah.
But you're right, it does veer a little bit. I certainly wouldn't call this one horror. There are no, ghosts in the classic sense. My inspiration was I became fascinated with the idea as AI was blowing up all around us.
Mhm.
My warped mind had this idea. I remember I was in Houston on book tour, and I was just reading about this maybe 3 years ago, the potential for what we now all would call the deep fake, right? The very convincing video or audio. And it was one of those kind of frightening news articles. I went for a walk before my event, and I was thinking, wow, I wonder if you had just the voice of, I think initially I was thinking the voice of the boss at, Delta Airlines calling the pilots to say, don't fly. Um, how much trouble would that cause? And then I thought, that's kind of boring. It would be, I always wanted to build the most emotional investment with the reader as early as possible.
Mhm.
So I thought, okay, who could really creep a pilot out and
Yeah.
convince him not to fly? And that's when I hit on the idea of the mother. So
Yeah.
the mother calling, in some cases, the mother who is dead, still, reaching
Yes.
out, and it's her voice, and she interacts just the way you would think a real conversation would happen. So that was the jumping off point. But then I wanted it to align with the Cold War and that Cuban Missile Crisis moment, because the parallels, I think, between AI and the way we approached um, researching and testing and deploying nukes feels a little disturbingly familiar with this. It's an arms race. We can't afford to lose. That means we can't afford to regulate. And that means some great things will happen um, from that type of research science. There's the potential for really good things to happen. There's also the potential for really bad things to happen. And so I wanted to grab those two time periods and kind of squeeze them together. And as I did that, I think you're right. I never would have described it as science fiction, but
Mhm.
I was so determined to sell the kind of plausibility of the whole thing that I went down in the weeds of research, as I said, I always do. There was one moment when I was surrounded with all of these books on like different metals and their conductivity of electricity, and um, it's like quantum physics and different philosophical takes on physics. And my wife went through the living room and was looking at everything that I had surrounded myself with, and she was like, you don't actually have to solve time travel. Yes, that's fair enough, but I think I'm close. So
I feel like it kind of did. I feel like,
if they would just test it, I feel like it would work,
yeah,
right?
I feel like I read the book and I'm like, okay, this would work. This would work. Get some graphite. But,
Yeah.
and I never would have thought that you could blend that AI and this like Cold War, that these two things would work as well as they did. So it was a very seamless intertwining. So
You were
you,
very, very
I can,
fortunate to not have seen the first five, six, seven drafts, because um, if it feels seamless, that's wonderful. But that was a real struggle. I had never done that before. Those jumps between timelines, and
Mhm.
every time I went from one to the other, I would feel like, okay, this is the story. I just need to stay here. So getting the balance right was really that was a challenge for me, and I hope that it worked. And getting Crane in there too.
Yes, yeah.
Most people nationally have never heard of Crane,
Mhm.
and it's the amount of fascinating research that is done out there and has been done out there is just incredible to me. But also just the notion that it's the third largest naval base in the world, and it is in landlocked Indiana. I
Yeah.
just there's something that gives so naturally it like provides these urban legends and the
Mhm.
what are they doing behind
Yeah.
those gates questions. So I'd always wanted to use that location, and this was finally a chance to do it.
Yeah. And for our viewers who don't know, Crane is like, not too far from here, Crane Naval Base. And it part of Departure 37, one of the timelines is set almost exclusively in Crane. And I was telling my husband the other night, who was very upset, I have to say this, that he couldn't be here because he works a regular job, not like us. And he has read a ton of your books, and his favorite is The Prophet. He wanted you to know that's his
Oh,
favorite.
great. Okay. That's
And so I said, Departure 37, part of it takes place at Crane. Do you know about Crane? And he was like brushing his teeth or something and very innocuously was like, yeah, they build bombs out there. And I was like, what? It was just like, oh, yeah, everybody has heard about, the things they do out there. So that was I really enjoyed that. part of the story in Departure 37.
We'll see if the higher ups at Crane agree, but
Yeah, we'll see if
I
it
made
actually
sure to
makes
put in
it.
an author's note. It's the reminder that, it's all fiction, guys. I know nothing.
Yeah, if it actually makes it to publication, then we'll know that the Navy
We're
has
safe.
approved. Yeah. So I do have a few reviews here of Departure 37 that I wanted to quickly read. Because you said like it's not really horror, it's not really science fiction, but Stephen King, of all people. So Stephen King says this, you have to listen. If you love the Twilight Zone, this is for you. It's a mind blower. And I thought that was so accurate. It feels very Twilight Zone in the best non-corny way, you know?
Thank you.
And then Publishers Weekly said, in this striking thriller, Carson nimbly entwines a contemporary coming-of-age story with a tale of Cold War paranoia. With copious cliffhangers, an original premise, and a resonant emotional center, this builds on Carson's previous success. It's a winner. So when you hear reviews like that, are you like, okay, I've done it. Like this is not going to be a flop, or do you still feel nervous as you release each book?
I would love to say I feel good when the book comes out. And when the reviews come in, I feel relieved. But I'm always at this stage, I'm only thinking of things I wish I had done differently or better or could still change. Um, I, it's about 5 years, I feel like, before I get any enough distance to say that I think a book was decent or not. The Prophet is one that I'm I'm pretty pleased with, but that took a while before I um, felt that way. I just so much of it is rewriting that the moment they take it away from you and you can no longer change it, um, it's very easy, or for me at least, it's very easy to get sort of trapped in my own head thinking of missed opportunities. So every positive review is sort of a sigh of relief, but I don't necessarily think they're right. I need 5 years to assess that. And ultimately the readers decide. The King quote that you mentioned, that one was really special. And the fact that he reads my work at all has been just kind of beyond surreal.
Mm.
And he will send, he sends these little notes as he's reading along.
Wow.
And we'll just
Yeah.
kind of like highlight a favorite sentence or so you know I know he's reading it and I know
Mhm.
where he is in the book. And when you think about the demands on his time, the idea that he goes out of his way to do that it just says a lot about him as a person. Unbelievably down to earth, generous guy, but I will admit I'm always terrified when he picks it up too. That's like the best and most nerve-wracking day when he says, when he sends that note that he's started. I spend the next week I'll be out for a run or whatever, and suddenly my mind is going to, I wonder if he's gotten to this scene yet. I hope that.
Yeah.
In his book on writing, he talks about how you should have an ideal reader,
Mhm.
and in a way, he has always been mine.
Mm.
Because I think his touchstones, or my touchstones rather, he's so well read that he knows he's read all the crime and noir stuff from like the old days. He's reading Michael Connelly and Lee Child and the New Guard, but then he also brings the supernatural and the horror. And um, there aren't many people in my life who have read like Cormac McCarthy and Stephen King and Raymond Chandler, and he covers that. I feel like he's one who can point out all of my influences. Um,
Mhm.
and I like that because the way I view not my job so much as just the act of writing is sort of a conversation with the books I've loved as a reader.
Mhm.
It's the only reason anyone sets out to write a book. I guess any sane person sets out to write a book. There's the manifesto, that's a whole different thing.
Yeah.
But if you want to write a novel, it's probably because you really love reading
Mhm.
novels, right? So it's all about trying to sort of tip the hat to the people who you love while also creating an original voice.
Mhm.
So you brought that up as far as why you're writing and the reader, being a reader, you want to write. I read somewhere that you get your demons out on the page. So how do you manage those emotions of psychology and emotion when you, how does that not take a toll on you when you dive deep into some of these themes that are kind of intense?
It's a wonderful question, and honestly, I think at the risk of sounding really pretentious, if it doesn't take a toll on you, you're probably not doing it right, or you're not caring enough. Maybe that's a better way to say it. The Prophet comes to my mind here, where I had a character who I so desperately wanted, he could choose to kind of go left or right in his life, and I wanted him to go right, but I knew the story, he was going to go left. And I remember feeling very drained by that book because he was so haunted
Mhm.
and so plagued with regret and guilt. And he was on this journey for redemption that, one, he could not find, and two, he did not need to take. But I began to really feel that. I mean, that book kind of wore me out. And in Departure 37, Marty Hazelton was a bit of that. There were a few drafts in this book where um, it was too bleak. It was too bleak. But that's the good news is you get to rewrite. And so Charlie, our 16-year-old protagonist in the contemporary day, Charlie was such a beautiful counterweight for me
Mhm.
with all of there's the heaviness of the atomic race going up to, the Cuban Missile Crisis that she sort of balances
Mhm.
emotion. And so what I wanted was the fun of the Twilight Zone, and that what, could it happen question with um, a little more sort of thematic weight, but you need it to be fun. The first job is to entertain the reader. So, it's a really good question, and at times I do get probably more emotionally beat up by fictional characters than would seem healthy for a person who claims to be sane.
So you've written both books that have a character that continues on and like a series, and you've done standalones. Which one do you prefer? Having a character,
Standalones for sure.
you have more creativity with that, you think?
Um, I For me, it's more that I sort of get tired of the repetition of what I have put the character through. And then I don't want to write a procedural only kind of mystery.
Mhm.
Um, so I don't know. At a certain point with Lincoln Perry, I mean, I loved writing Lincoln. I hope actually to go back to him at some point, but I just kind of felt like I put him through so much emotionally and physically that it begins to feel um, implausible to me, or lack that authenticity. And I'm in awe of the people who can do it well. I mean, Michael Connolly can
Oh
uh,
yeah.
keep delivering Harry Bosch, and he doesn't slip or miss. But also, I do think part of it is the the journalist in me wants to respond to some story that has nothing to do with that. You asked earlier about place.
Mhm.
So um, I don't have any interest in writing about the same place over and over again. I want to be able to move around. Obviously, I jump in genre, and that's really difficult to do with a series character. Uh,
Mhm.
the challenge of it is each book I'm meeting the character for the first time, and so I think I'm probably more rewrite heavy, but
Mhm.
that's the trade.
So I don't know if you're allowed to say this, but do you have any ideas for your next book? Are you percolating on something? And will that be Scott Carson or Michael Koryta?
That will be Koryta. He's making
Okay.
a comeback. So
Okay.
the grand plan was I would do like a Carson and a Koryta, Carson Koryta. I managed to screw that up within 3 years. It didn't take long. So we have two Carson books in a row, but the next one is it's a big gangster novel that starts in Indiana in the 1930s with
Oh.
a woman, and it's based around a true story. Everyone knows John Dillinger,
Mhm.
and almost no one knows this guy named Al Brady. But
Hmm.
the Al Brady gang that followed Dillinger with all these Indiana guys, Brady was public enemy number one. There's a lot of overlap between him and Dillinger, and he and his gang ended up making their way to Bangor, Maine, where they were killed in this spectacular shootout in the street, and then one was electrocuted in Michigan City. And everyone in Maine, not everyone, but lots of people in Bangor really know these guys. And I
Hmm.
think that was very interesting because in Indiana, no one seems to, but they came from Indiana. And I make the drive twice a year. I'm in Maine now and I'll be back in Bloomington. So I just thought it was interesting that I knew their path so well. And the protagonist, I'm using one of the gangsters, his son, who does not know him, has a point of view. And then my favorite character by far is um, the mother of this gangster's child. Her name is Savannah Cody. And uh, I love her more than any character I've met, probably since Sean Weller. So
Oh, that's
Wow,
great.
this is high praise.
I'm
Yeah.
excited to read this one.
Yeah, me too. It sounds like it's gonna have echoes of The Given Day by Dennis Lehane.
a lot of yeah, and what he did
Love
with
that.
that
Oh, so excited.
trilogy there. Yes, the
Yeah,
Coughlin stuff was definitely on my mind.
yeah, that's exciting. Yeah.
So are you a plotter? Do you outline? What's your writing
I would
process like?
love to be able to do either of those things. I only know where it starts,
Uh-huh.
and with this one, I thought it would. With the new one, I thought it would be easier because I would knew how it ended if I was going to follow the real story. But then it turns out I still didn't know because I was introducing fictional characters. So I just kind of figure out, who the characters are. Um, I want to understand a problem that's right in front of them, and then I want to know something that's kind of looming over their shoulder. I want to know a little bit about their past. I realize I've done this long enough that I can see some repetitive interests thematically. I'm very interested, apparently, in regret and guilt. 'Cause I keep coming
Powerful
back to
themes.
those things. So,
Yeah, yeah.
and
Powerful.
Savannah is a character who, on the page, would present as someone who has no, I has never met regret. She has no, very confident, and so she was sort of refreshing to me.
So when can we expect roughly this book?
It'll be next summer.
Oh, great.
Okay.
I get my act together on the rewrite. It should be next summer.
Yeah. Okay. And then Departure 37 comes out August 5th. August 5th, which is like 2 weeks from now.
That's right. I'll be floating through Indiana on book tour. So if at all possible, I'd love to get out to see you guys and
Oh, we would love to.
Yeah. Yeah.
We would love that.
We
Thank you.
also have a safe in our store. I don't want to like flip the camera around too much and have it be janky. Can you see it? Okay.
oh, that's okay. Right out of the Al Brady days there.
Exactly. And we have a lot of people come in and they're like, was John Dillinger here? Was John Dillinger here? Because there was a John Dillinger
There was
museum
the John
in town.
Dillinger Museum. My mother used to bring my sister and I down there when we were kids.
Oh,
They would go to like all of the little shops, and she
mm.
would leave me at the John Dillinger Museum. So anytime she like kind of uh, expresses disappointment with my subject matter, and why don't you write a funny book or a kid's book? I remind her that she was the one who took me to the
Yeah.
Dillinger Museum. So there's a little bit of responsibility there, Mom.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So you said that you had been an intern in a private investigator's office and a journalist. So you obviously draw from that experience. What other experiences in your life do you draw from when you write?
I mean, that's the best thing about being in the job of writing novels is that you end up getting to draw from everything. And when I teach writing, I always try to make a point of asking people to think about their worst days. Um, you can imagine how much fun my class must be. Welcome. Think about your, most crippling memory. But my point there is everything is grist for the mill. And if you're doing the job well, then you're very concerned with the emotions and what is the reader feeling. So that means even a bad day, maybe particularly a bad day, can be useful for a book down the road, because that emotional memory is something that will connect with most of, or at least some of your readers out there.
It's
So
like,
it's really, I mean, it's a way of, I'm not pretending I'm like so well adjusted and cheerful to say, okay, my flight just got canceled. And so I know this is an experience I can use someday. And yet, while waiting on a 10-hour canceled flight once, I got a whole scene that I used in a book called If She Wakes. And so it's like everything can be, grist for the mill there.
that's great. So I love the sentence, he cried when he left the boy. That stuck with me through the whole book, because I kept trying to place, where is this going to come in? What kind of, so that is an emotional situation because you think, why did he cry? Why did he leave the boy? All of those things. So I love that you pull from emotions, bad and good. So thank you.
I love that you reference that because I always, when I teach, I think I end up benefiting more than my students because it kind of forces you to think about, are you are you actually doing this in your own work? When you tell them, here are good practices. And one of the things I always talk about is put down a gold coin early, something that puts a question in the reader's mind, and then make them wait on it, build that suspense, but don't forget about it, pick it up. And that was an example of I had no idea where that would come in and how I would resolve that, but it felt like a really good gold coin to put down early. And then honestly, it ended up helping to shape the ending for me. So good eye, a sharp reader here.
Yeah, sharp reader.
That just really stuck with me. I was like, I really liked that quote. And when I got to the end, I was like, I see. So well done.
Thank you.
Breadcrumbs on that path were perfect.
Yeah. Well,
That's exactly how I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah. We so appreciate you
Yes.
coming to Zoom with us this morning and telling us a little bit about your upcoming book, Departure 37, and this new release next summer that we are going to be eagerly awaiting. We have been so looking forward to this interview, and it has just been wonderful. So thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure. We'll have to get some sort of social media post involving that vault because
Yeah.
there's there's
Yeah.
a key scene in the new book that involves a bank vault. So to know that you have one in a bookstore is very useful for me.
Yeah. It's 1905, built in 1905, turn of the century. It's
Got to
old.
be a ghost in there too.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. And all the original hardware is there. So the gate closes and it's really cool.
We find books toppled down all the time. So who's to say that there could not be a ghost?
I'm guaranteeing you there is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you guys. This was truly a pleasure for me.
Thank you.
Thank you. And good luck on your upcoming book tour.
Yes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
We want to thank everybody for hanging out with us today as we got the privilege of interviewing Michael Koryta. We hope you enjoyed that. We hope this is the first of many author interviews that we get to do. Thank you guys so much for watching Best in Show Books. I'm Jeanna.
And I'm Shelby.
And we will see you next week.